Hi, second period. I am so sorry that I can't be with you. Oh my goodness. Here today, but I have a very important doctor's appointment that could not be scheduled at any other time. So I promise I'll be back tomorrow. But in the meantime, I didn't want us to get behind on our reading of Touching Spirit Bear or on the skills that you're learning in ELA. So I recorded a little instruction for us to go over together before you continue reading and finding out what happens to Cole. I'm trusting that you did your due now, that you have it out on your desk still, along with those 3 items from your backpack. Remember, 2 of the items that you find need to be able to stand upright without any support, but one of them is going to be falling over, it won't be able to balance without some sort of support for it there. Do you have those? Did you write down what they are in your do now paper? I hope so, because we're going to continue working and building off of the idea and the concept behind those items and how it relates to different parts of grammar in ELA. For me, what I chose was Legos. And if I was in class, I'd actually bring these Legos out for you and show you. But I'm trusting that we've all had some experience with Legos and understand what the visual here is showing you. I have some of these 2x4 bricks, and if I stood them up on my table or even on the palm of my hand, they would stand upright, they would be sturdy, they would not be falling or leaning or tilting because they are stable. Those 2 stand by themselves. But I also have this Lego that's like a tail fin of some sort of lightning airplane or something. This one is a little less stable. This one, if I put it on my hand, it falls over, it tilts over. It needs to be connected to something else in order for it to stay upright. The reason why I have to start with show and tell is because it relates to the concept that we're going to be learning about today. And that is this idea of clauses, not Mrs. Claus, not Santa Claus, but clauses in the English language. What are they? How do we use them to build sentences? Okay, so let's talk about it. Clauses have a couple of key characteristics that every single clause has. For a clause, it has to have a subject, which is going to be like a noun or a pronoun, and it also has to have a verb. If it doesn't have a subject and a verb, not a clause. And this is like our Legos, my Legos, because Legos have some characteristics as well that if they don't have these characteristics, I would argue they're not Legos. For example, all the Legos I have ever seen are made out of plastic. If you see something made out of wood, you're like, off brand, that is not a Lego, right? Because they're all made out of plastic, different colors, but still plastic. And every single Lego has got some sort of stud on it to connect it to other Lego pieces. So these are the same things like clauses. Clauses must have a subject and a verb in order to be a clause, just like my Lego must be plastic and have studs to be a Lego, right? And there's 2 types of clauses. So when we separate them out, if they've got subjects and verbs, great, it's a clause. But now there's 2 categories. There are some that are independent clauses. This means that they can stand upright and not fall over. They don't need any support. That is an independent clause. That means that it could be a sentence all on its own. I could put a period at the end of it and it means nothing else. However, there are some clauses that are dependent. Those are the items that they may have a subject and a verb in them, but there's something not quite right. They need more information to be supported as a true sentence. This is like my Lego, that tail fin piece, the one that kind of flops over unless it's connected to something else, or my little coaster here, right? It needs something to lean up against in order for it to be able to be stable and secure. Or the clause needs something to be connected to for it to be considered a true sentence. What does this look like? Okay, so 2 types of clauses. Clauses have subjects and verbs. And the 2 types of clauses are independent because they can stand alone as a sentence, put a period on it and be done. Or dependent, they do have a subject and a verb, but they don't sound right without more information. Look at the examples on the board. The stallion tossed his mane happily. Stallion is my subject. Tossed is my verb, right? I could put a period here because that's a true sentence. It's got a subject and a verb, and it can stand alone. It is stable. It can be unsupported by anything else. Put a period on it. Done. Complete thought. But over here, after the last sailboat crossed the finish line, what happened? I don't know. There's more information that I'm lacking. Yes, I've got a subject. Yes, I have a verb, but there's more information there that's lacking that I'm kind of like, and what now? So that's a dependent clause. It's not a complete thought without some more words added onto it. So what does this have to do with our show and tell time? Well, you guys chose out 3 items, 2 that stand, 1 that flops over, and that is going to represent for you on your do now paper independent and dependent clauses. I want you to go ahead and label each of the items that you listed on your do now, either as an independent clause because it stands upright all by itself, or a dependent clause because it flops over, it needs some support. Guest teacher, can you pause the video for just a second to give them a chance to label their do now papers and then put them away once they do? All right. So hopefully you have your do now paper put away now, and we're going to continue on showing our understanding of the 2 different types of clauses. Independent can stand on their own as a true sentence, or dependent, they need some more information in order for them to make sense as a sentence. I'm going to ask 2 of you to volunteer to help our guest teacher pass out supplies. There's going to be a paper with a paper clip and little green slips attached to it that one of you is going to pass out to each individual in our class, and the other one is going to pass out a glue stick to each person in our class. Once you get those items, well, you are going to sort your clauses, because they're all clauses because they all have subjects and verbs, into 2 categories. In one column, you're going to put all of your independent clauses, okay? These are the ones that can stand alone. You could capitalize it, you could put a period on it, and it's a sentence. And in the other category, all the dependent ones, the ones that just don't quite sound right. Yes, they may have a subject and a verb, but they need more information in order for that to be considered a sentence that makes sense. I'm not there, so it does say get my okay. I'm going to give an answer key to your guest teacher. So I want you to get the guest teacher's okay before you glue them into the correct column. So this next few minutes in class, you can work independently, or you can work within your table group. That would be fine too, as long as you're keeping your conversation to your table group. And I want you to sort them into 2 piles, independent and dependent. Here's a key hint. There is the same number of independent as dependent. So if you get 1 off or 2 off, you know that something's not quite right. There needs to be the same number in each column. Go ahead and pause the video here. And after you guys complete this activity, I'll start back up. We'll build off of this concept. Yay, so you're experts now on clauses, both independent and dependent ones. And you've checked over your answers with your guest teacher. So you made sure you've got accurate examples in each column of what those independent and dependent clauses look like. But what do we do with that? How can we use these different types of clauses in order to build sentences? Just like how can we use different types of Legos to put together and make some awesome creation? Well, there's 4 different ways that we can craggle these sentences together. Did you catch the Lego movie reference? And I'm going to go over them with you, and then we're going to practice together. So here's the first one. The first one is just a simple sentence. This is basic. This is 1 independent clause. Look at that sad little Lego there, all by itself. It's not connected to anything else, but it is an independent clause. So it's perfectly satisfied, being solo, being its independent self. I could capitalize it, I could put a period on it, and it is like, I am here, I am fulfilled all on my own. So here's my example. I have written my essay. That is a simple sentence. That is 1 independent clause. And it doesn't have to be glued together with anything else. It can stand on its own, unsupported. The next one, though, gets a little more complicated. What happens if I have my two Lego pieces and I wanted to like take these two independent clauses or these two Legos that could stand alone independently as their own sentences, but I want to craggle them together. I want them to join together. This is called a compound sentence. Maybe you've heard of compound words before, like watermelon. Water is a word on its own. Melon is a word on its own. We put it together, watermelon. Or butterfly, right? Butter is a word on its own. Fly is a word on its own. Stick it together, butterfly. Kind of a similar idea here. A compound sentence, like a compound word, takes these two independent clauses and smushes them together in one sentence. So if you look at my example here, I have written my essay. That can be an independent clause all on its own. I could put a period right here, but instead I'm gluing it together with the word and I have another independent clause. Mrs. Parejo has scored it. The period doesn't come until the very, very end. So I've got one independent clause. I've written my essay. And then I have another independent clause. Mrs. Parejo has scored it. When I smush these two independent clauses together, that word and is called a coordinating conjunction. Fancy word, but really what it just means is it's going to have a comma, and then it's going to have one of these fanboy words, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so. So I said fanboys because if you notice like the F for, the A for and, the N for nor, B for but, on and on, it just kind of spells a nice little mnemonic device to help us remember. So the key to remember compound sentence is independent clause, independent clause. And in the middle of them is going to be a comma and one of those fanboys coordinating conjunctions. It's going to make more sense when we practice it. But let me introduce the ideas first. Next way we can smush these Legos or these clauses together is over here where my head is hiding. I'm going to move me over here. Complex sentence. Remember how I said I had this little tail fin guy here? And he can't stand on his own because he's a dependent clause or he's representative of a dependent clause. He needs something to prop up against, to balance upon in order for it to make sense. So I balanced him on one of my independent clauses. And now he's totally fine. He's got the support he needs. So a complex sentence is going to be one clause that can stand on its own and one dependent clause that props up next to it in order to stand upright with a little bit of support. So let me show you how this looks in a sentence. I wrote my essay. Right here, what I underlined, that's the independent clause. I wrote my essay. I could put a period there, right? But instead, I put this dependent clause before it because I was anxious to finish it by the due date. Now, maybe if we're just talking casually, you'd be like, because I was anxious to finish it by the due date. But you can't just say that and have it be a complete sentence. I need more. I may have a subject. I may have a verb. It may be a clause, but it's a dependent clause. I need more information. And that's why I have connected it to this independent clause. So when we see a dependent clause connected in the same sentence to a independent clause, now I'm messing up the words in my head, that's going to be considered complex because I got one of each. Ooh, it's so complex and complicated. One more. What do we call it when we craggle all these sentence structures together? Well, it doesn't get very creative, but it's easy to remember. It's called a compound complex. And there's lots of different ways you can organize them and craggle them together. But basically it means you've got at least two independent clauses and one dependent clause. So this one would look like I wrote my essay, independent clause, finishing it just before the due date, and Mrs. Parejo has already scored it. So in this case, I have got two independent clauses and one dependent clause, and I put them all together using one of these fanboys here. You see that word and again, the comma and, in order to make a compound complex sentence. Oof, that was a lot. All right, Flip your paper over, please. We are going to try to see if you can apply these ideas. And if you notice, I put the little pictures there of the Legos to help you remember each of the different labels and what it looks like in our model of Lego talk so that we can make that parallel and that connection with our sentence structures. All right, so guest teacher, if you could please pause the video and allow students to work with their table groups in order to identify each sentence as simple, compound, complex, or compound complex. And they can write just right here on this next to the sentence. And if you pause the video and let everybody finish, then when we come back, we'll check it over and cover it together to make sure that they're doing it all right and that they understand. Did you get an answer for all of them? I think there's 8 here. All right, let's look at them one at a time. First one. Garvey and Edwin took Cole to the island. It is a simple sentence. That is just one independent clause. Yeah, it might have 2 subjects, and I see that word and in there, but there's not a clause beforehand, nor is there a comma. So that is just a simple sentence. Let's look at the next one. Oh, also a simple sentence. This one's got a compound predicate, ignored or abused him, but there's no comma before the or, and this is not a complete clause here on the side. There's just a verb, there's no subject. So that makes this one a simple sentence as well. Did I trick you yet? All right, third one. Although banishment to the island might have been good for Cole, he did not see it as an opportunity. Okay, this one is a complex. It's going to start with this clause. Although banishment to the island might have been good for Cole. What? Like, I want more. I don't know where that sentence is going. That first part, that is my dependent clause. What follows it is my independent clause. He did not see it as an opportunity. If I wanted, I could capitalize the H and he, put a period here, and make that its own sentence. So that's complex. How about this one? Anyone could attend the Circle Justice meeting, but only those who were holding the feather could speak because it was a way to show respect. Ooh, this one is the trickiest one of all, the compound complex. Anyone could attend the Circle Justice meeting. Does that sound like an independent clause? Could you put a period there? Yeah, you could. So there's one independent clause. Oh, I see a comma in the word but. That's one of those fanboys, boys for but. Oh, only those who are holding the feather could speak. That right there, only those who are holding the feather could speak. That's also an independent clause. And then lastly, because it was a way to show respect. Could I make this last part its own sentence? Because it was a way to show respect? No. It needs something more. This is why a lot of times on your do nows you start a sentence with because, but it's not a complete sentence because you're lacking that independent clause to join it to. So this one's got 2 independent clauses, 1 dependent clause. Put them all together, we've got a compound complex. How about this one? Cole ate the butter, eggs, and baking soda Garvey brought. Now, this one might have tricked you because you saw the comma and the and. However, this is just a list of items. It's not separating 2 independent clauses. You wouldn't say Cole ate the butter, eggs, period, and have that be a sentence. And then baking soda Garvey brought. That's not a sentence. So this is just a simple sentence with a list of items in the middle of it. Getting there. The circle did not know where to send Cole, but Garvey had an idea. Now this one is a compound. We have 2 independent clauses. The circle did not know where to send Cole. I could put a period there and be done. But instead I've got the comma and the but, that fanboy coordinating conjunction. Garvey had an idea. Garvey had an idea as an independent clause. It can stand all by itself. Next one. When he was asked about Cole's birthday, Mr. Matthews couldn't remember. So we've got a complex sentence. It starts with our dependent clause. When he was asked about Cole's birthday, could I put a period here? Not enough information. Sure, it's a clause, but it's not enough to stand as a complete thought. Could I make this? Mr. Matthews couldn't remember. That's an independent clause that can stand alone. So when you get the dependent connected to the independent, that makes a complex sentence. And my last one. The bear sunk its teeth into Cole's thigh, and it clawed at his chest when Cole kept fighting. This one is a compound complex. The bear sunk its teeth into Cole's thigh. That's a complete thought, an independent clause. I could put a period here. Do you notice the comma and the fanboy? The and is the coordinating conjunction. It clawed at his chest. Could that be its own sentence there? It clawed at his chest. Okay. What about this part? When Cole kept fighting. That's the dependent part. That's the last piece that needs to be connected to something else. That it makes it the compound, because there's independent clause, and then the dependent clause. How did you do out of 8? Can I have my 2 volunteers go and collect the papers and collect the glue stick? Before they come and collect it, I would like you to please make sure your name is on your paper. And people who are collecting, you can just put those into the turn-in tray for me, please. Thank you. You guys are now going to go ahead and read In Touching Spirit Bear, because I want you to see how our author uses various different types of clauses and sentence structures when writing his novel. He doesn't always go simple, 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 because that would be way too boring. Instead, he tries to bring in variety, and you're going to see that as you read because you're more aware of it now. Before you start beginning to read, I want to remind you, we're going to pick up on page 87, and this is what active reading looks like for me and for your guest teacher. It means your books are open to the correct page. That when we turn the page, everybody's turning together, so you're tracking the text with your eyes. You're not looking around the classroom or at your friend. And your heads are up. They're not on your desk like this or down in your lap. Your heads are up so that we can tell you're paying attention. And active reading sounds like voice level 0. So we should be listening to the audio while we're tracking the text with our eyes.